Hello, and welcome back to the first video of the semester. Today what we're going to be doing is what you see on the screen, this little kind of cyberpunky street scene. You know, it doesn't look very cyberpunk right now, trust me, eventually it will. And this scene is inspired by, if you follow Black Magic Craft on YouTube, it's inspired by this project that he did, a little tabletop diorama for tabletop gaming scale 32mm minis. But he did it. I thought it looked really cool and would be a great project for us for both just some more modeling practice, which we could all use, but also for texturing, which we are going to be starting here in a couple of weeks. But we're going to need something to texture, so I thought that would work really well. So that's what we're going to be doing. This is not going to be the finished scene. This is just what we're going to try to finish by the end of this video. I already know this is going to be a long video, so I'm going to try to get right into it. I will be going over everything more or less step by step. So this is going to be fully real time. You can see you'll see all of my shortcuts in the bottom right corner. Yeah, so I guess let's just get going. I'm going to open up a new scene. I'll save that. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is save my new scene, and then I'll call this one Cyberpunk Street. Recording. Okay. Now, I want to start this semester really kind of reinforcing good modeling habits and bringing up the attention to detail. So last semester was kind of just about getting familiar with the tools and getting used to making objects in 3D space, and just being able to see and think in this way. Now I want to start working on best practices and helping you create more organized scenes, which will allow you to make more complex scenes without getting overwhelmed. So with that in mind, we want to make sure that we're always going to be modeling from the origin. So by default, you see the 3D cursor is at the origin, world origin. If you hit Shift C, we'll put it back there if you need it to. And then I'm going to add in a plane. And right away I'm just going to tab into edit mode and hit S to scale it, type in 5, and hit enter. So now I have a 10 by 10 plane. By default, all of the Blender units... Oh, I should also turn on screencast keys. There it goes. Okay. So by default, all of the units are... I'll bring up item. Here we go. Are meters. So one unit, one Blender unit is 1 meter. So I have a 10 meter by 10 meter plane. Okay. I know I need to name it. I'm not going to name it yet because I'm going to break this up into a few different pieces. So I'm also going to take a look at snapping here. I want my snapping on increment, so it's going to snap to the grid. And then I'm also going to check this box, absolute grid snap. That's going to snap to the actual grid lines. Okay. So back in edit mode, and I'm going to add in one edge loop horizontally, and I'm going to hold down Control. What that's going to do is temporarily turn on my grid snapping. So it toggles it while I'm holding it down. As soon as I let go of it, it's back to smooth. And click that again, and now it's hard. So what I want to do is I want to add this edge loop 4 units down. Okay, this is going to be my sidewalk area. It's going to be a pretty wide sidewalk, a 4 meter wide, so about 12 foot wide sidewalk. That's fine. It's going to give us a little bit more room. It doesn't have to be exactly realistic, and this reference image and a few others that I have pulled up are for inspiration, and I'm not trying to exactly copy them. So, all right. So I have my sidewalk, and what I'm going to do is, like I said, I was going to separate this. So I'm going to select that new face. I'm going to hit P to separate that by selection. Tab into object mode, and now I can start naming. I'll call this sidewalk. Okay, now we're going to go back to our larger plane. This is going to be the street, but we also need to add a curb slash gutter to the street. Yes. So I was just thinking about, I'm going to take the sidewalk and I'm going to go into side view, so 3 on the number pad. I'm going to move it up a little bit. And we'll go up about 2 units. I'm not going to be too concerned with snapping everything. It's going to be kind of by eye. That's actually, it might be a little bit much. I'll bring it down just a little bit. Okay. Now back to our street, I'm going to add in, oops. So whenever I accidentally hit caps lock, it turns off screencast keys. There we go. So I'm going to add in one more edge loop, and this is going to be kind of the curb slash gutter area, which I don't want to be too big, so we're going to go about 0.4 units. Again, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Another thing that you can do to help with proportions without worrying too much about measurements is you can add a kind of a human or a skeleton to give you a sense of scale. So if you go to your preferences and you in your add-ons search for Rigify, check that, and what that's going to allow you to do is if you hit Shift, if you go to Object Mode and hit Shift A, you can add in an armature human meta rig. Add that, and there is a roughly 6 foot tall human analog. Now this is obviously just a skeleton and not the full mesh, but that's fine. We just need a point of reference for scale. So we'll go into side view here, and I'm going to bring this down something like that. Okay, that will work. Okay, I'm going to select this meta rig, and I'm just going to hide it for now. Okay, so back at my street, that looks okay. So now I'm going to hit P and separate that by selection as well, and we're going to call this the curb, and the other plane we will call street. Now we need to make this curb look like a curb. And the way I'm going to do that is add in another edge loop, and something like that should work. Actually, let's bring that forward a little bit more. Yeah, okay. And then I'm going to select this face, and I'm going to extrude it up. Now I want to extrude this up and have it snap to my sidewalk. So what I need to do is I'm going to right click to cancel the transform. The extrusion is still there. Right? If I go back to it and click on it, you can see that that extrusion is still there, but I need to change my snapping to vertex mode. If you're interested in the keyboard shortcut, Control Shift Tab will bring up your snapping menu. Okay, so now that I have the snapping on, I can move it. I'm going to hit G to move it, Z to constrain it to the Z axis, and then again I'm going to temporarily just hold down Control and hover over a vertex, and that's going to snap it to that height. Okay. Now this is going to create a couple of extra faces that I don't need. I'm not going to worry about side faces. We'll just delete those. Whoops. I do want that one though. Okay, delete those faces. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to get a nice curve on this edge here, right? So it looks like a curb. I know some are more angular than others. I'm going to go with a more rounded look. So the way that we're going to do this is with a bevel. So I'm going to hit Control B. You can also right click with the edge selected and bevel edges. And then I'm going to use my scroll wheel to increase the number of cuts. And something like that should work pretty well. Doesn't have to be exact by any means. Okay. So there's our curb. The other thing, we are eventually going to want to add in this little storm drain here. So we're going to need to make room for that. So I'm going to hide this street for a second, go back into our curb, go to the top view here, so I can get a good sense of proportion, and I'm going to move this G in the Y direction, so G, Y, and go about 4 units out. Or I guess it would be 0.4. Okay. The other thing is curbs usually have a kind of slant to them since water needs to drain. So I'm going to add that. I'm just going to select this back edge and move it down just a little bit. Okay. And then I can hit Alt-H to unhide. And we'll keep that rig hidden. And go back to my street. Select that edge that's now overlapping. G to move it. Y, hold down Control and snap it there. Okay, so there's our curb. Now we need to start figuring out our storefront / wall. So I'm going to add in another plane. Mesh plane, make sure you're in object mode. I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I'm going to scale this in the X direction only by 5. Okay, so now it's 10 units long because it starts as a 2x2, so 5 times 2, 10 units. And then I'm going to scale it in the Y direction 3 so that it's 6 units tall. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees along the X axis, so RX 90, and my screencast keys don't seem like they always work. Okay. So now it's vertical, and now we need to move it up 3 units, because if we look on the front view, it's exactly 3 units down. So GZ3. All right, I often move constraining to 1 or 2 axes, so that's going to be a very common thing. And then I'm going to move it in the Y direction, and I'm just going to snap it there. Okay, you can see that it's not perfectly lined up. That's fine. There's going to be some irregularities in the sidewalk, and so we want to have a little bit hanging down underneath. Okay, let's name that. I'll just call it wall for now. Can always rename it later. And now let's start blocking in some of the key features on this wall. Okay, so we've got kind of 3 main features. There's a bunch of extra stuff that's just kind of adding to the aesthetic, but it's these 3 features that I want to focus on first. And really I'm going to start with this big one right here. That's going to be a garage door sort of thing. So I'm going to tab in edit mode. I'm just going to do this in front view. And I want to add, I'm going to go back to my increment snapping. No, I'm not. We'll just eyeball it. Okay, so I'm going to add in an edge loop. I'm going to start defining that cutout. So I want to go roughly 3 units above the sidewalk, so it's going to end up being right about here. Okay, I don't know if wireframe is going to be easier for you to see, but roughly 3 units up, and then I'm going to add in another edge loop, and I want to have a little bit of a border, so kind of go there, and I want to go 3 units across. So roughly there. Okay, and I will add, I'm going to add 1 more edge loop, and I'm going to hold down Control and snap it even with the sidewalk. Okay. So this is going to be roughly the garage door. If you want to check that, you can always turn on the meta rig. Go to front view. And the meta rig should be, I'll put them on the sidewalk. Snap it to that vertex, move them back, move them over, or her. Meta rig can be anything you want it to be. Alright, so you can see that if this is a roughly 6 foot tall person, then the door is about 9 feet tall, which seems about right. I think it'll work. Okay, so we can hide that rig. And now this next part is something that we're going to do for all the main features here. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to hit P to separate by selection. Tab in object mode, select our separated face. We're going to rename this. I'm going to call this garage door frame. I'm going to edit mode, select it, and I'm going to first inset it because we're making the frame first. Inset. And I think we'll go something like this. And then there's a little bit of adjustment that we want to make. I don't want it to be, I don't want a bottom face. So we can grab that face and just hit X and delete that face. I also want this top face to be a little bit larger. So I'm going to select these two edges, and I'm going to double tap G and just edge slide them down, make it a little bit thicker. And then I can select these bottom two vertices, hit G, Z to move them down, hold down Control, and snap them down there. Okay, once I have that, I'm going to extrude it a little bit. So that's kind of the frame here. I'm going to extrude it again, and this is going to be where the kind of the door sits. Okay, and then I'm going to select. Actually, first I'm going to hit P and separate this by selection. Rename our new face. This is just going to be the garage door. Okay. And we are eventually going to add this kind of corrugated texture to it. So it's going to have some depth to it. I want to make sure I give the frame some room for that. So I'm going to go back to the frame, and this second extrusion here, I'm going to Option click and select the whole face loop, Shift deselect that bottom face, and hit E to extrude, and right click to keep it in place. And then I'm going to hit Alt S. That's going to scale it along the normals. Okay, I'll do this in wireframe so you can kind of see it. So if you remember, normals are a face normal is the direction that that face is pointing. It's perpendicular to that face, and I can actually go up here and turn on. Whoops. I can turn on my face normals, and you can see these little blue lines are the direction that those faces are pointing. And so when I hit Alt S to scale along normals, each face is going to scale in the direction that it's pointing. Okay. I'm going to right click to cancel that for just for a second. I'm going to go into front view so you can see this clearly, and I can see how far I'm scaling. And hit it again, Alt S, scale it. Now you can see there's a little bit of a taper there, but we can fix that very easily in a second. So we'll go something like that, and then right down on the bottom left here, we've got our tool options. I'm going to check Offset Even, and it's going to even everything up, make it look good, and I can turn off my face normals. Okay, I'll go back into solid view, and there we go. So there is where the door is going to live. Again, all this stuff can be adjusted later. That's not an issue whatsoever. Okay. So I'm going to grab the door here, and I'm just going to move it forward on the y-axis so it's kind of in the middle there. And in wireframe here, we're just going to scale it up along the x-axis, and I'll select then this top edge and move it up a little bit too. Okay, so now you can see right now it's just a plane. Again, we'll deal with that later on when we start adding details and textures, but that's kind of gets a sense of what that's going to look like. Another thing I think I'll turn on just to make it easier for you to see what's going on is up here in our viewport shading options. I'm going to bring down this this menu, and I'm going to check cavity, set the type to both, and that's going to help you just kind of see where all of the edges and recesses are. Okay, so that's the door. We're going to do the same thing real quick for these two windows or display cases or whatever they end up being, screens. It's just a frame and then a plane for whatever billboard or banner, or, whatever we decide to put there is. So I'm going to go through this a little bit faster this time. So I'm going to select my wall. We're going to start by just kind of laying out where we want these to be. Okay, again, we can turn on our meta rig if we need to. We'll keep them off for now. I think that's going to work. Okay. So I'm going to hit P to separate that. And then might as well do the other one while we're here. Now, one thing I want to keep in mind is I don't want to like have this, if my next case is going to be like here. I don't want to have the distance between these elements to be the same. I want to mix it up. I have some variety. I also don't want the edges to line up. If I want this to feel like more of a kind of cobbled together beat up world, I want to start embracing some of that irregularity. So I'm going to move this down. I'll select that one as well. I'll move that down a little bit. And we can grab this and we can move this down as well. Something like that I think will work. And I'll select these two faces, hit P, and separate that by selection. Okay, back in object mode. We'll start on this one. We're going to call this one window frame H for horizontal. Okay, select it. We're going to inset. And then we're going to extrude it back a little bit, inset it a little bit more, and extrude it back some more. Something like that. And then we'll hit P and separate that last one by selection, rename that to just window frame. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to go back to this frame here. Now right now, it's just kind of one face thick. Alright, so I want to give it some depth on the wall. I don't want it to just stay flush. So I'm going to option click on this edge. It's going to select the whole loop. I'm going to move it out in the Y direction a little bit. And then I'm going to go to edge mode and select this edge loop. And we are going to extrude it back in the Y direction. And we'll snap it right there, holding down Control. Okay, so real simple, real easy to do. And now we've got this window, if you will. I'm going to select this edge first, and I'm just going to dissolve that edge. I don't need it there. I'm also going to, I think I'm going to move this over. I want to have some space for another thing, so I'm going to move this. Let me move it over here. Do I want to move it over here? Maybe we'll move it over here. We could always make changes later. I'm just thinking if we look at our reference. That's not the reference, that's the reference. Okay, this has a vending machine here. I think I want to do something similar. So I kind of like how close that is together, so we'll do something like that. Yeah. Okay. I'll just move that over, something like that. Okay. Now, what we can do with the wall is the same sort of thing. It's GX, and we can snap it right there. And we can grab these as well. GX, hold down Control, and snap it. Easy fix. Okay, and that's why we kind of block this out first before we go through and add too much detail. Alright, so same sort of thing here. We'll rename this. We'll call this window frame V for vertical. Okay, and I'm going to inset this. I'm going to inset this a little bit more. I want it to go a little bit thicker. Something like that. And then I'm going to, instead of extruding, I'm going to inset it again. I'm going to go about half as far again, and then I'm going to hold down Control. I didn't click anything. I'm still in Inset, but now I'm going to hold down Control, and it's going to add some depth to it. So it adds this kind of nice taper, something like that. Okay, and then I will inset one more time. This will be a little smaller frame, and this time I will extrude it back. And then that last face I will hit P to separate, and we'll rename that as well to just window vertical. Okay, and then I need to do the same sort of thing that I did before, is I need to give the frame some depth on the wall. So I'll move it forward a little bit, select the edges, and move them back. Oops, not move, extrude them back. So E to extrude, Y, and go right there. Looking at this frame too, I'm going to select this face loop around the edge here, and I'm going to hit Alt S and scale that up a little bit, give it a little bit more presence there. Yeah, I think that works, and it'll make sure we have offset even checked. Okay, so that looks alright. Check my references. You know what? I'm going to undo that. I like the more of the variety here in thicknesses. So, okay. So we've got that. We can start kind of blocking in some additional things now too. Before we get to start adding some details with the grate and what I'm calling a truss. But we can block in some of these additional details just to get a sense of how things are. And then I'll probably start a separate video to get to those details, just so this video doesn't run 2 hours. Okay, so we'll start with these areas right here, which is super easy. I'm going to front view here. There's one. And I'm going to shift right click on the wall up here. It's going to move the 3D cursor onto the wall, you can see. Okay. I'm going to hit Shift A, and we're going to add in a cube. I'm going to name this. And we'll just call this, I don't know, electrical panel. It's kind of an ambiguous term here. Alright, and I'll go into edit mode, and we'll start scaling it. So we'll scale it. That's probably be about the height that I want. And we'll scale in the X direction, and then we'll come around here in the Y direction. Okay, we can go hit 3 to go exactly into side view. Say maybe like this. I'm not going to add any of the detail on it just yet. Okay, and you can see there's a bunch of different panels here, and they're all have various kind of greebly bits. So that'll be later when we get to the detailing stage. This is just to lay them out. Okay, that's Y. And then what I want to do is I want to snap it to the surface. So I'm going to hit G, Y, and I'm going to go the other way. So I'm going to move it out so it's hovering above it, and then GY, hold down Control, and snap it back, and now it's exactly on the surface. I'm not worried about that intersection in the back. We're never going to see it. Okay, so now that I have that, I go into Object Mode, and I can hit Shift D to duplicate it, and the temptation might be to hit X and slide it over exactly, but as I said before, I want these to feel a little bit disheveled, so I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. And we'll go into edit mode, and we'll maybe make this one a little bit shorter and maybe a little bit wider. Something like that. Yeah. And then we'll duplicate it again. Move this one over. Edit mode, scale it in the X axis. Something like that. And I'll go to Wireframe and select these bottom vertices. Make sure you're in Wireframe so that you select the vertices behind it as well. If you do that in solid view, unless you have toggle X-ray. If you have toggle X-ray, you can do it. If you don't have toggle X-ray enabled, and you just click across, you can see that doesn't select that back vertex. So that's why I toggle into wireframe so much. Okay, I'm just going to move that down. And then let's move that back over. Duplicate it, go over here, select everything, scale it in Z-axis. Oops. Okay, something like that. And let's do one more over here. Oops, I hit caps lock again. Kind of move that down here. Okay. And maybe I'll take these and move these down just a little bit. Okay. That works. Now we have this little sign here. We can do a similar sort of thing. So in front view, shift right click to roughly where we want the sign to be, or at least at the beginning. We'll probably end up moving it around. And we'll add in a cube. Go into edit mode, scale in the X direction, scale in the Z direction. Okay, let's name it. We'll call this sign small, which suggests, yes, there will be a large sign as well. Okay, I'm going to move it out in the Y direction. And then side view here, let's scale it down a little bit. Move it in the Y direction some more. I have not moved this in the X direction. I've kept it symmetrical. And that's important for this next step, where I'm going to add a mirror modifier. You can see that the object's origin it's slightly offset, but if I go into front view, you can see that's still in the center of the object. If for some reason your origin isn't, you can select all the geometry, hit Shift S and snap the cursor to selected. Hit Tab and go to Object, Set Origin. Actually, you don't have to move the cursor, you can just go to Object, Set Origin to Geometry. Okay, and as long as your geometry is symmetrical, it'll pop into the center. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to hit on Edit Mode, Top View. I'm going to add an edge loop right in the center. Okay, so remember that's Control R, click once to add it, and then right click when you're sliding it to keep it in the center. And then in Wireframe, I'm going to delete the left half. Okay, so now I have an open back sign. But we can go to our modifiers, add in a mirror modifier. X direction is correct. Just make sure you turn on clipping. If you don't turn on clipping and you move it in the X direction, you can see that it just kind of separates. If you turn on clipping, it will not separate. Okay, so we've got that, which is great. Now we need to kind of make, there's a little kind of a frame inset around it, and then there's also some arms that go back. So I could do the inset thing like I did on all of these window and door frames, but I'm going to do this one a slightly different way, just because I like the edge flow it's going to give me a little bit better. So I'm going to add in 2 edge loops, and I'm going to scale them apart in the Y-axis to about there. I'll do the same thing vertically, 2 edge loops, scale it in the Z direction. Okay, and I basically want this to create a square. Now it could, I'll scale in the Z direction. This is one I could use snapping for. Another thing that you could do is you can go up to your viewport shading options and just turn on, where is it? Oh no, it's not up there, it's up here. In the viewport overlays, you can turn on measurement edge length, and then as you scale it, you can see the numbers that'll tell you the length of each edge. So if horizontally it's 0.0922, I can scale it until we get 0.09 to close enough. Okay, so if you really want to be super careful about your dimensions, that's one way that you can do that. All right, so once I have that, I'm going to select this, I'm going to hit E to extrude, and I don't want to go all the way back, because I want that still to have some thickness. I'm also not going to separate this. I'm going to keep it all one object. Okay, so we've got that. And now we need to extrude back to the wall so it has a connection point. And so what we're going to do, first I'm going to hit number pad slash, and it's going to go into local view, just so everything is out of the way for a moment. I'm going to grab these two faces, and I'll keep them active for now. Hit number pad slash again to get out of local view, and GY, and I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to try to find, there we go, somewhere there's a vertex for that to snap to. Whoops. We don't want to hit G, we want to hit E to extrude. And then, whoops. So once we've extruded, then GY. Okay. Now let me see if I can find that vertex again. There we go. So now it's extruded back into the edge. Now, a couple additional things that I want to do. I'm going to go back into local view here. And I'm going to delete those end faces because I don't need them. Also, I prefer this to be more of a square. So I'm going to go in top view here. And wireframe and vertex mode. I'm just going to select these front vertices. Okay. Just those front ones. And I'm going to move them, oops, in the X direction. Something like that. Okay, and then I can select this face, and I'll push that in a little bit more too. Okay, so there's our sign. To make it slightly more interesting, I'll come out of local view here. I'm going to adjust the mirror modifier here. So in side view, we will go into edit mode. I'm going to add in an edge loop right across the horizontal center. Okay, or horizontal across the center. And right click to keep it in the center. Go into vertex mode. I'm going to select the bottom vertices and delete them. And then in my mirror modifier, I'm going to add the z-axis to it. Okay, so now I'm only working on a quarter of the sign, and it will be mirrored all around. It's just going to make this next part a little bit easier. So I'm going to add in an edge loop back here, and I'm going to select this, and I'm going to hit E to extrude, right click to cancel the transform, and Alt S, scale it out, something like that. Check my offset even. Okay, then I'm going to add in one more, kind of back here, and I'm going to do the same thing. So select those faces, E to extrude, right click to cancel the transform, Alt S to scale along normals. I'm going to make this one a little bit larger. And then we can adjust the offset even, and if that's going a little too much, we can bring down that offset as well. Okay. So, there's our sign. Now, one thing that you might notice, and it's kind of tough with cavity on. I turn cavity off. All these edges are still really sharp, and so I want to start improving that. So I'm going to add a bevel modifier, and I'm going to bring this amount way down. So I'm going to go 0.003. Okay, so we got a nice little bevel there. I'm going to increase the segments. Right click and set it to shade smooth. Okay, and I'm going to add in a subsurface modifier. Okay, so now it's got a little bit of edge quality to it. We can always adjust the amount, so I'm going to click and drag on it and hold down Shift so it's going in really small amounts. Something like that, maybe. Maybe increase the segments to 4. Okay. So this is a way to kind of get that nice beveled edge look without adding a bunch of control loops. Sometimes the bevel doesn't work quite as well, and I might go and do control loops anyway, but certainly for now, it works pretty well. We can also, to help with the shading, I'll turn cavity back on here. I'm also going to go to my object data properties, right here, this little green triangle. And under normals, I'm just going to turn on auto smooth. It's not doing a whole lot here because it's a pretty flat object. It's kind of a good habit to be in. It just helps the smooth shading be smoother where it's supposed to be, and not smooth where it's not supposed to be. So there's our sign. And looking at it, it's kind of sticking out pretty far. So I'm going to go into side view here. Edit mode. Select all of these vertices. And just move them along the y-axis. Maybe something like that. Okay. And then in front view, I'm going to just relocate the sign to maybe like here. Again, we can turn on our meta rig and just kind of check our proportions. That feels about right. Yeah. Okay. The rig really helps kind of give you a sense of scale. You know, you can hold it in your head, but to have kind of a concrete sense of scale is very helpful. All right. I think I'm going to call it for this video. I'm going to be right back here in just a second when we start adding some details. And primarily those details are going to be the grate, kind of the storm drain, and this truss, which are relatively simple. It's going to heavily use some modifiers. It's going to add some nice detail and really kind of start to fill out the scene. We'll also add these pipes. I may do the sign. The sign is just the same as this. I didn't model the connections to the building because I hadn't decided what I wanted those to look like yet. But kind of that's where we're going. So I hope this was clear. Again, make sure that you are modeling from the center. Use mirror modifiers where you can. Sense of scale is also very helpful, so you can add that meta rig to do that. And yeah, I'll be right back with the next part.